So I'll really quickly do some introductions and then we will dive right in and pass the meeting over to Chris. So my name is Jonathan Martin. I work for Avatar Partners. I am responsible for our product, Simplify XR. I'm a product owner, and I'm also, I wear a second hat where I do a fair amount of development. So Avatar Partners has teamed with ThirdEye, and we are in the process of porting our many of our applications over to the ThirdEye device, and we are going to be supporting the hardware with our Simplify XR product as well. So we'll be able to deploy applications that are developed by our clients with the product. We have quite a few applications in development for our customers, for the Navy, for the Coast Guard, and for the Air Force. And we're excited about the partnership and looking forward to seeing that develop. So Chris will be our host today. He'll be presenting, and I'll tell you a little bit about Chris. He has a background primarily in healthcare. He's done a lot of work with medical devices and ultrasounds, and then more recently has connected and is working with ThirdEye and primarily focuses on solving problems for end users and making sure that the company has strategic partnerships with industries, with key players in the industry. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over the meeting to Chris, and he's going to tell you more about himself and about ThirdEye's product.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I want to thank Jonathan and Marlo Brooke, CEO of Avatar Partners, for having me on, having this discussion today. I'm going to do my best to basically educate my interpretation on the market and really help you understand the difference between all these different headsets, which one is right for your custom job, and what makes sense to deploy either large scale, small scale, in each particular use case. There's a lot of dynamic pieces to when problem solving a lot of these new solutions for this type of technology. So we're going to walk through it, maybe talk about some scenarios, go over the different kinds of hardware, and also brief a little bit on how Avatar Partners plays a role in that on the software side of things as well. So they are hardware agnostic, but we do see a lot of synergies, and we're very, very excited to work with Avatar on a lot of different solutions here. So I'm going to share my screen. And Jonathan, if you can confirm when you see my screen.
Okay, you're up.
Great. So ThirdEye and Avatar, brand new partnership. Again, super excited to work with you guys, work really closely with you. We're really excited specifically about a couple different applications, one of which is a remote assistance platform, and this other program called Simplify XR, which is what Jonathan spearheads here. So what I want to really go over today, and what I really try to look at and tackle when analyzing an opportunity or a problem or trying to help a partner solve another client's issue is, first of all, we're going to look at, the market, what industry and market are they in, and what's the evolution and where that market sits currently in this state. We're going to look at the use cases, what's most popular for those markets. And for the most part, there's a lot of bleed over, and, but some of the markets, like, for the most part, most of them have some kind of leading edge stuff where there's some really custom detail, and that's where Avatar really shines, for example, on doing a lot of custom work. We're going to talk about the software side, the hardware side. Are you going to do mixed reality, or is it strictly augmented? Is it strictly just a heads-up display, or are you doing tracking? Do you need SLAM? We'll get into what that is if you don't know what that is. And also these other dynamic factors and variables that really play a huge part in making a decision on the hardware that you're looking to choose. And then we're going to do a little bit of comparisons, and we'll do a Q&A after that. So with regards to, Jonathan, looks like there's 8 more people in the waiting room. Oh, it looks like I have to let them in now. Let me just admit all of them. Okay, and we will continue. Here's the market from the ThirdEye side sorry, I'm trying to get this out of my way here. So on the ThirdEye side, so we're in government and defense. This is probably number one. This is where ThirdEye came from. Our parent company is called Bank3, BANC3, and they're a DoD contractor who's been developing optics technology for the government for over 20 years. So that's where ThirdEye came from. So we've been a company for about 3.5 years now. So we've adopted a lot of those patents and technology and put them into a commercial size hardware. Aerospace and aviation, again, that kind of bleeds into the government side, but we do work privately as well. Construction and architecture, this is a huge, huge industry now that's really starting to adopt this technology. But there's a lot of custom work with this, and there's a long way to go to get to a big mass adoption of this product. Healthcare, again, it's very infant in the stages of adopting this technology. We'll dig into that a little bit more. The education side, we do work with a lot of different universities. I know Avatar works with some educational programs as well. Automotive, this is really, really big for step-by-step instructions, remote assistance. Automotive manufacturing, there's a lot of crossover there. Warehouse and distribution, still kind of early, but there's definitely a lot of really strong use cases happening right now. Oil, gas, energy, utilities. This sector is very heavy in the remote assistance space. Telecommunications, same thing. It's a lot of field-based work where you need people on the ground, either for training purposes, you're doing an inspection, you need to call in a remote assistant. Super popular. And then entertainment as well. This is very, very small. I mean, there's definitely some applications out there, but for the most part, we're not going to touch base on entertainment. It's not the biggest it's not the biggest focus for us specifically right now. Jonathan, just out of curiosity, how you see kind of where the market's at within these industries and how Avatar plays a part with them.
Sure. So our focus has primarily been government and defense. We are seeing a lot of movement in construction and architecture as well. And automotive is another big sector that we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of early adoption in those markets. Awesome.
Cool. Always curious from hearing about the market from a developer standpoint or a product owner standpoint. There's so many different ways to interpret this based on the different areas of feedback, right?
Absolutely.
So let's start out, level one, right, is what operating systems are out there, right? And what's compatible with the current systems that you're using right now, right? Is it easy to learn? Can you distribute it? Are there licensing issues with it? So realistically, what's out there now is there's Android platforms, there's Microsoft Windows operating system, and then there's spin-offs from Linux, for example, like Loomis, which is the Magic Leap product. So you really need to understand, okay, what's going to be able to plug in best? How much do we need to learn? And how hands-on do we want to be with the operating system and the firmware coding involved? Full disclosure, I'm not a coding kind of guy, right? I like to communicate the material, but there's no way I could sit down and do any kind of coding. So are there restrictions with that, right? And then what are the resources and the knowledge bases associated with these operating systems, right? Are you already using products within that ecosystem? So that's definitely a really big thing to keep in mind. But how easy is it to transfer over these ecosystems? Some of them are plug and play, right? Like Android and Windows 10, whether it's your phone and your computer, there's a lot of bleed over and there's a lot of cross-platform compatibility with that stuff. So that's just kind of number one, what you really want to keep in mind. From there, you're thinking about, okay, here's my problem, right? Does the solution already exist, right? Is the product already out there for the software? If it is, okay, whether you are going to resell it, whether you're going to use it as an end user, does it exist, and what is the modularity and the customization of what's already out there, right? And then second of all, which I didn't even put in here, is it economical? Does it even make sense to try to adopt this? If I can customize it, what are the added costs from there, right? Is it compatible with the other devices, kind of like the other slide, right? Can I call like the ThirdEye X2 on a HoloLens if we already have HoloLenses, right? So it's just small details like that, or even crossing over to a tablet. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no Apple headset out there yet. We know there will be one day, I'm sure, but at this point, you could still call a tablet, whether it's Android or Apple. And then again, what are the economics to deploy this? This is such a sticky point that we all really, really need to understand when talking with customers, or if you are the end user and you're looking to adopt this technology, how do you convey this appropriately so the ROI makes sense when you are communicating this to your other shareholders, right? Or stakeholders, or whomever, right? So this is really the biggest thing that, bottom line, is it going to make sense? Is it feasible? So for example, in this picture here, so this is a GIS overlay here, right? So, and this can be deployed on many different levels, but this kind of application is going to be extremely customized, right? Is that ROI going to make sense? Who's the customer? Is it the contractor? Is it the city that owns these 3D model, these 3D models here to overlay, to do maintenance, or look at future pipeline? I don't know. That's not my realm, but all I know is that kind of project is going to be extremely customized. So, among all of these industries, the one thing, if I had to say any of them had in common, it's remote assistance, right? And you see what I see. So for example, an auto manufacturer could be wearing the headset, a technician, right? And they can't figure out how to work on these extremely complicated cars nowadays. They can dial up the remote expert 1,000 miles away, right? If they don't know how to answer the question, they can dial up, the corporate office in Italy. The Italians can speak Italian through the laptop. The headset will translate it, and then now you can make live annotations right in the user's field of view, right? So now you want to take it to a next step and think, okay, well, do I want this do I want the annotations to be tracked? So if I look away, are those markings and text, is that going to stay in the same place so you can better easily identify and mark what you need to do, right? Where is the video stream going to be? Do you want everything directly in your field of view? Because if you change your focus, you can get past that, right? That's hence the benefit. Or do I want it off to the side? There's always really small details you need to start thinking about when you get into the human factor side of things. And that's something I'm going to touch on a little bit later. So the next step from here is the step-by-step, right? So this is when things really start to level up in terms of the customization, because now you have to customize it, right? You have to manually input, and there's a couple different ways to do this depending on the platform, is you can input the text into nodes. You can deploy the instruction manuals directly in your field of view to the side, right? For a lot of applications, especially in aerospace, by regulation, you have to have the manual with you, right? But now if it can be, if your hands free, you say, okay, next page, while you have the wrench, or you're doing wire bundling or anything of that nature, then you're accomplishing your task so much faster. And then if you get stuck, you can say, okay, headset, call Jonathan, right? And then Jonathan dials in and he's like, okay, cool. And then you start making that live annotation. And then he goes, oh, wait a second, Marlo really needs to see this. And then he types in Marlo's email or pings her on her cell phone, and then she can join in on the cell phone, right? So again, that crossover compatibility where they can see what you see, but you also have the text in your field of view. Just start thinking about all these small details, all these small steps to be able to make something like that come true, right? And come to reality. Current use cases. So, kind of going back to this example here, the hardware, is the hardware even capable of deploying these models of what you're looking at, right? Where are the models coming from? Is it a BIM model? Are you pulling it from the cloud? Are you pulling it from the headset? Is it side-loaded, right? Is the headset, the hardware you're looking at, is it capable of doing these types of things, right? Is this a really clandestine type of maintenance where you're on an oil rig or platform somewhere in the desert where you don't have access to these things? You have a very, very complicated step-by-step list that you need to go through, and maybe you don't even have 4G, 5G to make calls on the headset, right? So it's again, these small details that add up very, very quickly and become very apparent. Here's another big use case here is visual inspection with drones, right? So this is such a huge benefit to be able to keep your eye on the drone while still getting the telemetry and the feed from this product. So you can land and maneuver the device a lot more safely. So essentially you have two perspectives now, not just one where you're in VR or, where you're kind of going up and down, looking at the tablet, looking at the drone. you essentially just change your focus and you have a different perspective of where that's going to be, right? So we're starting to see an adoption and compatibility with drones much, much faster now. So we're working with a couple different companies on doing this. And I know, yeah, I know that at least with regards to a remote assistance aspect, this is going to be very, very big. So just keep that in mind with remote assistance. Inventory and picking solutions, this is also a very common one right now. I would say this is probably in the middle of market adoption. You know, there's some really good, really basic stuff out there for, like, if I pick a box, right, or if I'm wearing a headset, then it's going to give me an arrow, the most efficient way to go to that next place to pick something, right? So not only would you be able to do an RFID scan, again, this is up to the hardware. You know, you need to know what exactly you want to accomplish. You can scan the code, you can scan the box even without using a code in some instances. You get the direction to the most effective picking solution, you throw it on, and you just make your runs like that. And as a previous, you know, just when I graduated high school, I worked in a Coca-Cola warehouse, right, for 16-hour days. And if I had this technology then, I tell you, I would have been out of there eight hours faster for sure. So, you know, again, this is something that is deployed in different ways. There's still a long way to go. And again, this is kind of a really customized thing here. And I know some of the guys on the call here actually work in this space, work in warehouses, and do AR, VR training around that stuff. So they probably have a very strong idea of where this particular market is going. Here's a very, very interesting use case here. So again, I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible. Our headset has a thermal camera, right? So we understand that these equipment heat leakage checks are really important, and these use cases are becoming a lot more apparent. But now here's the thing. What is the newest use case on the market for these glasses now, right? It is thermal detection for the face, right? Facial recognition with doing the heat sensing, right? So with that being said, the sensor that we have in ours, it's the highest power that we could fit in, but with that being said, it's still really low resolution, right? So what we've done is adapted a FLIR camera to the top of it, okay? And, you know, while this is a very cool, very futuristic thing to do, right, it's not the right solution for everybody, right? So I'm going to give an example of this, is that last week, I had my first in-person meeting in about 4 months, right? It was with a Fortune 100 company, and they are using simple little handheld IR guns to scan wrists for temperature, which I think is the wrong place to start scanning in general. So we met with the plant director, purchasing, and a ton of end users, managers. And, you know, essentially, yeah, it's super cool that it can detect face. It can be relatively accurate to be able to say, okay, you may have a temperature, right? But is this economically deployable? Does this make sense to put on the floor? Because you're not going to buy the headset just for thermal. That's not why you buy it, right? If you just need to scan someone's face, then get a sensor there. But what they wanted to do was integrate it with SCADA systems, with a different database. They wanted to send the information to other people and have that be live, right? So after about an hour and a half talking, and actually one of the gentlemen on the call here today was with me there. He actually introduced me to this client. We had a great trip down. But after about an hour and a half, you know, we realized, you know, the headset, you know, it's very apparent to them that this technology is going to be used for them down the road. But for this, just for thermal, it's not for them. So what did I recommend them to do? And this is actually an idea that was brought up from a couple end users, because they said, okay, we want to leave it on a stand, and then if someone has to wear it, we do that. And I go, you know, it just sounds like you should just get a tablet. You know, as much as I'd love to earn this part of your business, is this, especially from the purchasing side, she made it very clear, this economically does not make sense, right? So if we're really considering getting adoption into all of these markets, we really need to think about, first of all, what is, you know, I don't want to use low-hanging fruit, but what is the immediate opportunity where this can be, where the ROI can be met almost immediately, right? And that's going to be the remote assistance aspect, in my mind, from what I'm seeing with all the customers that I'm talking with, right? And then from there, we want to build the modularity from that. So from, you know, the world according to Chris, I think that's going to be the best place to start, regardless of the industry, because you can truly make other hardware modular to the headset, along with the software, right? That's just a little quick tangent there. So again, when looking at the hardware, it's really important, can it handle the models? You know, is it powerful enough? Do the specs make sense? Does it have enough RAM? You know, is it an XR1 chip? Is it a chip specifically designed for augmented and mixed reality? Or is it, for example, the Hololens product, they have, I think it's a Snapdragon 850, which I believe is a laptop chip, right? So with that, there's a lot more things that they would need to do to accommodate that type of processing for what they want to do, especially with spatial computing. But it's working. It's working very well for them, right? It's an amazing product. But now we know it's you know, it's very complicated. So it's just another thing to think about. Not only can we logically process all of this, but can the hardware handle the immense amount of polygons some of these models possess, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more. So here's one thing that really your conversations should truly hinge on. And the question is, are you eventually going to need SLAM? Do you need tracking? Are you getting into 3D models? Are you going to need markers, right? So, you know, looking at this picture, do you want to get into the matrix? We all want to get in the matrix, right? So, you know, what SLAM is, and, you know, not everybody may know this, is it's called simultaneous localization and mapping. Effectively, it is the hardware understanding the environment. If it wants to deploy a model, you can do so, and it knows where that lives in the model, and it knows where the hardware lives within the environment. Just a super high level overview of what that is just kind of tracking the environment, right? So there's different ways that you can deploy 3D models, right? And this is where it really gets into the difference between augmented reality and mixed reality, right? So augmented reality, for the most part, is going to be two-dimensional. It's going to be telemetry. It's going to be smaller details like that, whereas mixed reality, you're actually interacting with that model, right? You don't always have to, but in terms of doing any 3D model, whether you interact with it or not, if you're going to go into a job site and see the future plans of a huge building, you're probably not going to interact with it. But the important thing to really think about is, you know, if you're going to do that, you need a binocular display. Almost any piece of hardware that has a camera and a screen or lens, or, you know, however it's going to display that image, it can do SLAM. The thing that matters for the 3D models is the binocular display, because the human factor with this is that you need both eyes to understand that the distance of that object. It's not about the display technology more so than it is you need a stereo, kind of like if you have like one headphone in, right? You're only going to hear one aspect of it. You're only going to perceive, you're not going to perceive the whole sound of it, right? So, you know, my engineers could explain it much better than I could, but the binocular display is very, very important to having an effective 3D modeling experience on the hardware. You can need to deploy a 3D model on a tiny tablet in front of your face, 100%, right? But it's not going to be the scale and immersion that you need it to be for a true mixed reality solution. Jonathan, would you agree with that that overview, or?
Oh yeah, I would think when you look at hardware that only has one eye that is being that you have a visualization on, you really do lose that depth, and that is an important and really game-changing feature of augmented reality and of binocular hardware. It really is pretty critical.
Cool. All right. Good. So in terms of tracking, you know, there are other products that can track. You can turn really anything into a marker. You can turn my face into a marker, right? And then things will happen. That's what, I don't use the app, but that's what Snapchat does. And you see people with bunny ears, right? So not our use case here today, or likely for the future, but you can really turn anything into a marker to keep a model in a certain place. So here's an example of this, right? So if you're going to start deploying some seriously big models on a job site, for example, or even if you're walking around the interior of a room and you need to display certain information, can it handle the amount of polygons, the density of these models, right? This is a really big factor if you guys are going to get into 3D modeling and start deploying this, whether it's step-by-step instructions and just kind of showing an animation, you know, can it not only handle the animation, but can it handle the scale of this? And then with that, definitely keep in mind the field of view. There are some specification sheets out there that are a little misleading. They'll say, okay, the field of view is 90 degrees, right? So that's literally just for the field of view out of the headset. That's not the actual screen. So you dig further in, it's like, oh, well, the the field of view for the actual screen size is 19 degrees, right? So you don't want to go too big, because then it's like you're looking at a 200-foot screen 3 feet in front of your face, and then you're looking all over, right? But you also don't want it too small. So it's finding that sweet spot for your application and the scale in which you're looking to deploy this stuff. So there are ways to get around really heavy, dense models like this one, for example, using techniques from video games, like it's called distance rendering. So the further away you are, it's just going to render like much smaller detail. But as you get closer, and if the headset has GPS, then it's going to start to render finer detail within that object. So there's different ways to go about that. So keep in mind, how to manage that if you're talking about that from a software side and the content creation side, right? Scanning capabilities. This is a huge thing that a lot of people that I speak with are asking about, especially on the engineering side. Any type of remote assistance, any type of inspection that people are doing. So on the left here, you have like a physician. This is this is a marketing one, right? Where it's alluding that you can scan the person's body or a finger or an arm or what have you, right? The problem with this is that it's dynamic, right? Meaning it is not still. And the way that the scanning works is by photogrammetry, okay? And when thinking about your hardware, you need to think about the quality of the camera, not only so the people on the remote expert side can see clearly on their much larger screen, right? But also, if you're going to start taking pictures, especially for training solutions, if you're going to record video, and if you're going to make models, right? You really need to have a high quality camera to get that fine resolution. So this is done through photogrammetry. And then, if you are going to do a scan, can the hardware even process this, right? So, it's just another thing to keep in mind. If you're not familiar with photogrammetry, happy to go in that deeper another time if you have any questions about it. On the right-hand side here, this is a model that I actually created in my backyard. So I got a wheelbarrow flipped over. If I could spin it, I would. It's just a screenshot of what I made. But essentially, this was made, it's actually, I'm quite surprised with how well it's turned out, to be honest with you. So you can actually, spin it, walk around it. I got a really great scan of this wheelbarrow. Much easier though, because it's static, right? Going back to the arm, if something's going to move even slightly, there can be stitching problems. So again, this is really ideal for like maintenance on hardware, on equipment, for example. Here's some dynamic factors here, right? And number one, and I love this picture here, is it making it easier for Homer to do the right thing for his job, right? Is it making Joey the new guy, is it making his life more simple, right? Does he still need to have the context on how to do it appropriately without the technology? 100%, right? But we want to use that as redundancy. If we can automate anything, right, we really want to do it. Maybe not anything, but for the most part, if we can automate a process and integration, we want to look into that. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is the type of environment that you're going to be doing this in. Not all headsets are obviously created equal, and that goes specifically with water resistance, with dust resistance, different types of nuclear ratings. Actually, I don't think anybody's nuclear rated just because it's such a ridiculously expensive certification to get. But think about the environment. So are you going to be in an office space creating really complicated models, right? In which case, get the HoloLens. That's exactly what you want the HoloLens for, right? Or are you going to be, I'm actually working with a client who is going to be taking the headsets down into a mine, right? And they want to do remote assistance from the inside of a mine. Super dusty environment, pretty humid, I would think, maybe with a bunch of people down there. And what's the environment? What's the integration going to look like? If you're in a mine, how are you going to connect to the cloud if you need to deploy something, right? Again, more, step by step by step, all these small things start to really add up very, very quickly. Are you going to be in the rain all day, right? If you're going to be in the rain all day, you don't, like if you're going to be working on a train, for example, right? And you need to be out there no matter what, you're not going to get an X2, a ThirdEye X2, you're not going to get a HoloLens, you're probably going to get the RealWear HMT1, right? Because that is completely water resistant, right? So you really want to pay attention to the industrial certifications as well. This is very, very important. Are they hard hat compatible, for example? So there's a lot of different things where the environment takes play. And then as soon as, when you're in that environment, what's the human factor there? Are you around really loud machinery where you can't use audio commands, you can't use voice commands, right? But you can pinch, you can zoom, but you still need to be hands-free, so you can't use the hard buttons on the headset, right? Super important how you're going to actually interact with the device when you have the solution in front of you, when you're trying to get work done, right? For a lot of this field-based stuff, you can use the voice commands, the audio commands, and for the most part, across the field, most of them work very, very well. But there's some, for the most part, a lot of these headsets have two microphones, one for your voice to actually hear you, and then another one to cancel the environmental noise around you, right? But there's some frequencies where it's just not going to work for certain headsets. For example, in January, we were at CES, and the headset worked very well in such a loud conference room. But then the other day I was doing a demo, and there was a lawnmower outside, window closed, and it couldn't recognize it over a lawnmower sound, right? So it's just small things like that where you really have to experiment, kind of get hands-on with those environments. Compatibility, right? What are you connecting with a SCADA system? What's your network? Where are you pulling the information from again? And then, going from there, are there compounding use cases that you can take advantage of? For example, am I going to do video recording for training purposes, on top of doing remote assistance, step-by-step instructions? Can I do a screen record of what's on there? And then additionally, store it on the cloud, for example. And this is like a solution that Avatar would do very, very well at. And this is stuff that they've customized, right? They have not only a customization process, but also they have out-of-box stuff to be able to accomplish this, right? So again, it's understanding that market. It's understanding kind of just the general stuff where, okay, what is the most easily accepted to get your foot in the door in these industries, right? And then end users, right? So are you going to be an end user, a reseller, or both? There's just so many different things. And the reason why I bring that up is, what's the licensing model going to be for the software side? Are you also going to resell the software license, or are you going to use the product that you're reselling? Say, for example, like one of my clients, they manufacture manufacturing systems, right? And if that's not like an industrial inception, I don't know what is. But if they're going to resell that, a headset with that, are they going to manage? Are they essentially going to add that end user onto their license so they can do the remote assistance aspect, or are they going to resell that as well, right? So again, just really small detail to think about. So here's different ways that, from what I can tell, this is what's out there, and to be able to interact with the device. So you have head motion controls for the most part, right, on a lot of these devices, and it has a cursor, and you can go left, right, and then you have hard buttons on the actual headset itself to be able to select and make a movement from there. You have the audio commands, right? So you can say, okay, headset, open up application, or you could say, okay, take a picture, take a photo. Does it understand both commands? Is it intuitive, right? So really look at that list of commands, and is it wide enough that it's going to be more easily accepted into your end user's workflow, right? Again, if you can't use the voice commands, can you pinch? Can you zoom? Can you, do whatever you want with your hands that you could actually program into the hardware, right? Are you looking to add on things in the future? You really want to look at this to be future-proof at this point in the market space. There are some aspects, not aspects, but there's some hardware out there that do have their own proprietary Bluetooth controller. We don't have it. I don't think Hololens has it. But you could also Bluetooth a controller to the headset as well. So that's just another option. So comparisons, right? So here are really the biggest ones that I see right now in the market. That's the top left is the Reeler HMT1, right? And this is perfect for remote assistance in some pretty serious environments, right? Really great product. They've done a lot in terms of getting market adoptability over the past few years and making companies realize that this ROI is very real, right? Especially if you're flying people all around the world to take care of really large pieces of equipment. And of course, so the X2, the one on the top right, I'm going to give myself the most real estate on this slide here. Again, we are binocular, right? So again, that 3D capability is is really important to us in seeing where the market is going, right? This is a very strong use case for us. Same with HoloLens. And kind of going into that, Trimble, I think we know the HoloLens is a very complicated piece of equipment. It's very sophisticated and very delicate. So Trimble has stepped in and said, okay, well, we want to change that. We want to make it safe. We want this to be able to use on job sites, right? So they've kind of ruggedized the HoloLens, which is a great add-on. And then I just wanted to compare Google Glass here for a second as well as a monocular. And I really don't know anybody who uses them. So, I know they're kind of the first out there, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. They're the first to really introduce this technology to a commercialization standpoint. That's not in government work or advanced heads-up displays, right? So I really don't see it out there. It's really maybe some remote assistance aspects from there. There are some applications there, but I personally haven't. I can't speak on behalf of using the Google Glass. Maybe it's a really good budget system at this point. I think it's $999. So this slide here is really kind of how I interpret where the X2 sits in the market space, right? So we really look at the HoloLens as our only competitor. Magic Leap is another binocular one, but they're not only are they pivoting, but they have a tether, right? So they have a separate processing pack. And in a lot of the use cases that we're in, the manufacturing floors, the plant floors, we can't have that. We can't have a tether. It just becomes dangerous. So, if we can do binocular, if we can be really lightweight, if we can be open architecture, right? This is where we want we want this to be accessible to everybody, and we want it to be economical, right? So, this is where we really look at HoloLens as our biggest competitor here, right? So here's just a spec sheet. I can make this slideshow available if you're interested. I'm not going to go line by line through each one of them. You can brief through it as I talk about it. Again, you are going to see some amplified specifications from the HoloLens. It's a very, very nice device, right? And here's the second page here. But for the most part, there's a lot of similarities here, right? But I would say probably the biggest difference between us and the HoloLens, and every product has its use case, right? And we're not going to be where the HoloLens should go, or we're not going to be where the HMT1 should go, right? But where we want to stand out is we're significantly lighter than the HoloLens, right? And if you're going to be doing this for 45 minutes, an hour-long calls, or even longer, that plays a huge part, is having that extra weight on your head, right? This is another big thing, is depending on if you are a partner, if you're looking to solve a solution, if you're already distributing headsets, right? What's the environment again, and what industrial and commercialization certifications that you need? So with regards to, again, looking directly at the HoloLens, there's a lot of similarities here when you add the Trimble on, in terms of the durability, the dust resistance, right? But, and maybe this was an assumption of mine, but when I was doing research to compare against the Trimble, I was expecting to see some drop testing for further, durability, not just personal protection equipment safety, but, if the thing falls off, or if there's a malfunction on it, and if it falls, is it still going to be okay? And I couldn't find any drop test rating on it. So that's just one thing that maybe does exist. If it does, please let me know. And then comparing us to that, we have done a significant amount of drop testing. So we would probably compare ourselves much more closely for a durability standpoint to the RealWear HMT1, right? So 2-meter drops, I think it's like 3,000 drops from any angle, and it's totally fine. And when you're looking at that, when you're looking at the maintenance of these products, and if you're going to have them for 2, 3, 5 years, if it breaks, can you replace the parts on it, or do you have to ship it back? Going to be a hot swap program? Are they going to send you one, right? So for example, like if you chip the lens, or if the lens breaks, can you just order a new lens and just swap it out and just adhere it, right? So again, it's that modularity, and it's being able to have it be as accessible as possible to not only deploy the solution, but to also maintain the equipment and maintain the solution, right? Are you getting software updates? Does the operating system even support the new applications? Just like, is that old Apple phone going to support a new application? Is the software developer going to push and support those applications for older operating systems. That's just another thing to think about. There are older Android operating systems out there on a headset that I think it's like Android 6. So just another thing to keep in mind, right? And then here's the pricings between them. So from the ThirdEye side, this is where we, again, really want to make this economical, right? It's so important to have, in my eyes, it's so important to have this be available as easily as possible. So not only is the hardware out there, but people can start playing with it. They can see the potential, right? And you can start solving problems almost immediately. So that's our approach and where we want to be with that. The HoloLens, of course, jumps right up. The Trimble jumps up even more. I want to put the Magic Leap in there just for further context of kind of where that binocular headspace exists with a price point. And then below that, I have the HMT1. Actually, that's 2,500, not 1,500. That's my typo there. And then the View 6. The View 6 ranges. That's another really popular one. I believe all of theirs. They have a lot of different products, but I believe all of them are monocular. Some of them you can choose left or right eye, but you can't do both. And then the Google Glass as well. So, just to briefly summarize, if you're talking to a client, if you're trying to problem solve and introduce this technology to your corporation, it's about the smallest details when looking at this stuff. Who is out there? Who has a solution? How can I customize it? Who's willing to work with you, not only on, the software side, right, and their support, but also, of course, the hardware. And how are you going to pick that right hardware to support your solution? You're picking the solution first, and you should build the hardware around it, right? Very, very important. So also kind of looking at the future, like I mentioned earlier, but I don't think I brought it up, but coming in the future for us, for HoloLens, for a lot of other products, is going to be 5G, right? You have to look at how 5G is going to be implemented. Is it going to be a chip in the headset, right? Or is it going to be compatible through a 5G hotspot by some measure? So, and what's the policy around that for your corporation, right? There's just so many variables that you really need to discuss. It's a long process. It's a very long process to get these solutions adopted. So just keep that in mind. And understanding other things like, what is important to your stakeholders? What is important to them to see this succeed? Does it even matter to them? Just another thing to keep in mind. So again, we're at very infant stages with this market, with this technology, specifically in the commercial sector. The government has been using this stuff for quite a long time, a lot of other private sectors, but it's how do we make this more commercially available, because it is out there, but the skepticism is still there, right? So we're still very early adopter phase of this technology. So ultimately, just ask super detailed questions, and just literally the smallest things that you can think of is really what's important, what's going to make this thrive for everybody here. So thank you so much. I know there's a lot of you on here that I know, so I appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I didn't make too much of a fool of myself here, but thank you to Jonathan and Marlo and Avatar Partners, and we're really, really excited to work with you guys. So yeah, we can jump into the Q&A. I saw a couple questions coming through. I'm actually going to pass it back to you, Jonathan, for the host.
Great. Okay, so we'll run through a few questions here. We were sent some questions before the meeting began as well, so I'll start with those, and then while I'm doing that, if anyone has any additional questions, if you could put those in chat, that'd be great, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So one of the questions that came through early on was, what are some of the biggest factors that you've seen from end users when they're looking to make a decision on which hardware to use? So what ends up making them pick a particular piece of hardware over another?
Yeah, so it's going to first come down to, the biggest thing, again, that I cannot iterate even more, is going to be the economics of the solution, right? So you really need to keep in mind, the software side is going to be surprisingly expensive for certain licenses. I know Avatar Partners has a very compelling price point for the remote assistance platform, for Avatar Connect, right? Whereas, there are some other applications out there that are really, really expensive. Maybe there's additional features there. So again, it's deciding that. But number one, it's going to come down to cost. Number two, it's going to come down to how simple is the device to use? Once the software is plugged into the hardware, if I turn it on, is it just going to start working, right? Do I have to program anything? If I put this on a brand new person, or if I put this on a 60-year-old veteran, are they both going to adopt this technology by just turning it on? And what's the level of acceptance with that? So it's really, you know, keep it as simple as possible, and how soon am I going to get the ROI, right? I think those are really the biggest things there. Aside from, and then from there it comes down to maintenance and compatibility and stuff like that. But I think those are really the two biggest ones there.
We've had quite a few questions, even in chat, about durability and environmental conditions, and that seems to be a fairly strong feature of the X2. What are some of the most challenging environments that ThirdEye has been able to deploy the hardware in, and what are some temperature ranges, humidity ranges? What are some challenging places that you guys have been?
Sure, definitely. So for the ThirdEye side, we have specifically, so it's rated from -40 to +60 Celsius. I would probably say the most challenging environment that I personally work with is probably that mine example that I gave earlier. There's probably a lot of humidity, a lot of dust, right? And with that's going to come likely a maintenance cycle that's probably a little bit faster, right? But again, we make it so you can maintain the device much more simply. You know, there's, I think also on doing airframe stuff, being out in the field in direct sunlight. So for example, our product is very, very well in the sunlight. We have, I believe it's 500 nits of brightness. It can go up to 1,000, but we have to dial it down. So we do very well in sunlight. It's just the exposure to the sun, dust, and some occasional moisture. We're not completely waterproof, but we are water resistant. That's probably the most hardcore application we've seen there. You know, because this is what we designed this for specifically, is for people who are in the field, people who are doing like this intense manual labor, right? So, you know, if you're climbing a telephone pole or something like that, just a lot of field-based work, but the most hardcore that I know is probably being in a mine. So.
We've had a few questions about prescription lenses and about people who have poor vision. How does the X2 and how does ThirdEye handle allowing an employee who may not have the best vision still use AR?
Sure. So I did see one comment about low vision. So there's kind of two ways that I think about this question is, you know, do I need glasses or do I need custom inserts to do it? Or can I use the headset for like macular degeneration, for example, right? Can I use it as a tool to see better? So we have a partnership with a company called New Eyes. It's very new, but they are looking to replace an older piece of hardware called ODG, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. ODG is no longer with us, right? Rest in peace, ODG. But they are going to use our headset now for macular degeneration. So enhanced vision, right? In that aspect. In terms of using it, if you have a prescription lens, we do custom inserts, and again, that's to keep really the industrial stability of that. So if you, like for example, like I know the Hololens, you can flip it up and you can wear glasses. We didn't want to take that approach. We want to have hard inserts in it. So it's really easy. You put them in, take them in, take them out really, really easily. So.
Sure. Does ThirdEye have a developer kit? Do you have any information on your website about a developer kit?
So there is a little bit of information on the website about the developer kit. There's how, again, we want to make this available to people. We want to make this economical. The developer kit for us is included in the purchase of the headset. If you're a developer, just let us know and we will provide the developer kit at no additional cost, right? So that's how we want to take the approach on it. We want to start building a lot of content. Like, for example, Magic Leap, I know they did a lot of promotional stuff, a lot of giveaways. And so we want to try to do that in our own way that makes sense economically for us to do it. And that's the best way that we think we can do it is kind of give that away for free with the purchase of the hardware.
Let's see. How are you handling repairs for the product once it has been fielded? So if there is some sort of damage to the product or manufacturing error, how are you actually supporting your customers in those cases?
Yeah, great question. So I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, that we want to make it so you can repair it, right? So if the lens shatters, or it's not going to shatter, but if it cracks or it gets scraped or something like that, you can replace that, right? Or if it's something more serious, we'll do a hot swap, we'll take it back, we'll replace it, we'll send you another one depending on the application, depending on if there's a support package involved as well. So there's different layers of how we can tackle it, but essentially we could work on it, or we could ship you certain pieces to be able to repair it yourself. So that's our approach. We want to try to make it, we want to work with people. We don't want to say like, okay, we're a large corporation, it's our way or the highway, right? We want to work with everybody on finding out what's right for each particular opportunity. So.
Gotcha. Great. Where do you see augmented reality and mixed reality hardware going in the future? In the next, what does this industry look like in 5 years?
Yeah, this is a big conversation for us internally, is identifying where's it going, because technology nowadays changes so fast, so incredibly quickly. And I don't want to give too much up, right, of what we're thinking about, but what we're seeing just based on the trends of hardware efficiency, software, is we're going to see 5G. So likely the processing is going to be taken off of the headset and processed on the edge in the cloud. And because of that, it's going to get smaller, it's going to get more efficient, it's going to get lighter. So those are really the biggest things where we see the hardware side going from there. In terms of the software mixed reality thing, it's just going to become a lot more sophisticated. We're going to see a lot more artificial intelligence involved. We're going to see a lot more SCADA implementation and telemetry integration with the hardware. And we're going to see a lot more, I think we're going to see a lot more scanning. Yeah, like from the headset itself. So.
Great. I think the other biggest question we've had is whether or not we will be sharing slides. So I believe the answer is yes.
I can make these slides available. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay, well, thank you, Chris, very much for your time. We really appreciate having you. We will share the recording as well, yes.
Sure. So I see some, I just want to address a quick question here that Anita Pearl, what about the first responders in COVID crisis? Can you please send the recording? Yep, yes, I'll do that. But with regards to I'm just scrolling through the comments here and saw it. So our response to the COVID crisis is, I kind of mentioned it before, is adapting a FLIR camera to it to do facial detection with a thermal. But additionally, we actually have a first responder application where, a security guard could wear this, or an actual first responder, not only scan and kind of keep a distance and understand, okay, are they going to have a temperature? How close can I get? What are the symptoms? But deploy the application, right? Here's a huge benefit, deploy that application, and you can run that with like an Avatar Connect simultaneously, right? So you can call up a remote expert while basically going through these instructions. Or if you get realistically, what you do is you go through the instructions and say, okay, next step, what's this policy, next procedure, and then if you get stuck, then you can call in a healthcare worker, operations, or somebody else, your buddy in Chicago. I don't know. But yeah, I just saw it quickly, so I just wanted to address that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Great. Well, again, thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation. It was very enlightening, and look forward to using your product internally and all over the world with Avatar's suite of products. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.